Move on to our second topic then, because I'm not seeing anything too interesting, and I figure I can hopefully save my voice for more talking later tonight. So, the second topic that I wanted to talk about, and this could probably be its own critical thought, or maybe this will kind of take the place of it, is the idea of measuring success when it comes to the game industry. And this has to do with a post by Kitfox Games founder Tanya Short on Gamasutra this past week, where she talked about the work that went into the success of their Kickstarter for their game Boyfriend Dungeon, a roguelike visual novel dating sim game that, while it may sound very crazy, has certainly had a success. They wrapped up their Kickstarter on September 15th, raising just over 270,000, I guess whatever is Canada's currency there. That's a good one, Thomas. Any games that are constantly updated? Probably stuff like Payday 2, Warframe, and even stuff like Team Fortress, but those are certainly on the high end of the scale. It's kind of hard to talk about, or even something like pick any Blizzard game. But it's very hard to talk about games as a service other than, or lifestyle games, as being like those massive hits or just dismal failures. But it kind of also leads, or it's actually a part of this conversation as well, that with Boyfriend Dungeon being a success, it's definitely going to be considered another game like Darkest Dungeon or even Stardew Valley as a game that had a lot of pre-release work done to it to get that success. And for a lot of people, whether you are in the game industry or just buying games, you may not see games having that amount of work done to it. In the post that Tanya made on Gamasutra, they talked about all the work that went into kind of the success of Kitfox. They've been doing this for 5 years now in terms of building community in their previous games. They had a previous successful Kickstarter for for Moon Hunters and Shattered Planet. They've done over a year's worth of teaser trailers, coming soon pages, getting the word out about the game. They even did more in terms of showing up at PAX South and PAX East to get people to know about them. And they, of course, accept tons of interview requests, which I should know because I've had Tanya on show several times, and we're trying to schedule time for her to come back on and talk about Boyfriend Dungeon. And of course, let's not forget the work that went into the Kickstarter, that they started, looks like in June, to have it start, or have it go up in August. But the point is, when it comes to these games that become successes, it takes a lot more than what people see when it comes to having them actually come out and earn that money or win on the Kickstarter. Exactly, John Speck. And like I said, many people who see... Yep. Oh, really? I have a failure workshop on Moon Hunter. I should... Let's see if I can find that really quick. Let's see, Moon Hunter and Procedural Generation. Practices. Oh, here it is, the Failure Workshop. Oh, and Hugh Monahan did something as well about the launch of Brigador. Yeah. I'll put it in chat. Oh, actually, both Hugh and Tanya did, and they're both guests on the... Or they were former guests here, but here's the link to the video for anyone who's curious. But yeah. And, that's its own topic we could easily segue into. But getting back to this one, when it comes to success in the game industry, a lot of people, and I make this joke before, about a lot of people will only see the results, and they will never learn about the work that goes into it. And this is especially true for indie games that blow up. When we see titles like Stardew Valley, Five Nights at Freddy's, and stuff like Boyfriend Dungeon appear front page on IGN, Polygon, Kotaku, and so on, I always love it, or even Dead Cells to this as well, that you'll see people write these pieces like, I just discovered this amazing game that I can't believe nobody else is talking about. And for the fans and people who know about, we've been playing these games for at least 6 months to a year beforehand. And it's always weird about how people view successes like this, especially other independent developers. You'll hear when you go to like Facebook groups and Reddit threads of smaller developers talking about how, why did this game blow up? Why are people talking about Darkest Dungeon and they're not talking about my game? And you'll see that in terms of the work they did, it is negligible compared to these other studios. I've spoken to smaller developers before, people who were planning to go on Kickstarter or Indiegogo for their games about Darkest Dungeon. They're like, yeah, we spent like a month, we're just trying to get ready for it now. And when I tell them that Red Hook spent at least a year, maybe even more, getting ready for their Kickstarter debut, they just go like this. Like, they can't believe it. And this is especially true of consumers as well, because when I look on Steam or the Steam forums for a lot of the big name games, you'll have people who go on Steam and have never heard of this game before. Their only big exposure may have been a YouTuber like Markiplier or Northern Lion playing this game. But for everybody else, they have heard about this game, they donated to the Kickstarter, they followed the dev blogs, and so on and so forth. And it's very hard, I think, for a lot of people, especially first-timers getting into the game industry, to equate that kind of work that goes in pre-production or pre-release to the success. A big example of this would have to be Cultist Simulator by Alexis Kennedy. Let me see if I can pull up his Kickstarter really fast. Here it is. So his Kickstarter, it looks like it ended last year. Yep. And that's true as well, Janševik. That so many games are released, it's hard to get noticed. But, yep, that it's very easy to find them if you know what you're looking for. But Alexis Kennedy for Cultist Simulator, who we talked to previously, they did their Kickstarter for the game. Why do I always have trouble finding when a project launched? I cannot find it. But either way, they launched their Kickstarter, and again, he had several months of pre-production and getting the word out before going on the Kickstarter. But even with that said, there are people who found Cultist Simulator months after its release going, what is this strange game about? And it's one of those issues, and Tanya actually brought this up on the Gamasutra piece, which I am going to post here in the chat as well. That, let me pull up her exact quote. Yep. That it's kind of this unfair cycle. That's her words, that the better you do, the better you do. And it's the idea, as we've said before, that a lot about game development, and especially about independent game development, is that it becomes a positive feedback loop. You get your first big game, you get that big hit, and it's going to become easier for your next game to do well, and your next game. And as I am sure as hell right now, for everybody watching this live recorded who's worked on a small game, a lot of people are chasing that big hit. They are chasing their Five Nights at Freddy's, their Undertale, their Stardew Valleys, and so on and so forth. Because as I always say, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy or a positive feedback loop once you make it big. And this is a big point about Kit Fox games with Boyfriend Dungeon. It isn't just Boyfriend Dungeon that succeeded. They got the word out about Shattered Planet, Moon Hunters, even if it did turn out to be a failure, the Shattered Isle. And it becomes that point where once you are big enough, your name becomes its own marketing brand. Like I've said, when the Stardew Valley developer announces his next game, you can bet any amount of money that every major game site's going to announce it for them. Because I can predict the headlines right now. Stardew Valley creator is working on X. The same thing with Edmund McMillan with Binding of Isaac and Legend of Bumbo, and even with his Kickstarter game. And that was another really big point. The Kickstarter for the Binding of Isaac, that succeeded like nobody's business. And it ended their Kickstarter with a grand total of $2,650,000, a little and some change there. And right now, I know a lot of people are probably sitting there stunned. But again, it's easy to see why I succeeded. It is a game built on a popular indie brand from a well-known independent developer who busted his ass off when it came to doing PR. For a lot of people watching this right now who didn't follow the Binding of Isaac Kickstarter, Edmund McMillan had a big campaign for social media and getting stretch goals done. He basically turned it into a here's a question for people watching this. What's the name of that term when they turn like social media or like playing video games into its own game? It's not augmented reality. It's I forget the term that they use for it. An ARG, I think they maybe say, but I don't remember the initials for it. But what Edmund did was every goal that they did, they turned into a mini game. So for one of their goals, it was adopt a cat and name him Guppy. And if someone did that, and if someone did enough one of those goals on their to-do list, it would unlock more content. So it was like gain backers on social media, hit a certain amount of money pledge. One of my favorites was describe the Binding of Isaac to your mother who has never played the game before and have that recorded on video. And all this stuff does is it adds more to the ether in terms of recognition and getting your name out there. I've said this before about game wisdom, but a major part about game wisdom is that I have a pretty good outreach on Google in terms of analytics, and I'm trying to do more on social media. And here's a bit of a fun question. Do you guys think I should try setting up an Instagram account for Game Wisdom? Because that's the one like kind of bastion of the internet and social media that I haven't done yet. But again, the point is that making it big these days, it's not about just going viral. Despite what many people consider that to be the dream, that I'm just going to post one video on YouTube, or I'm going to make one video game, and that's going to take off and explode, and I will be the next Minecraft or the next PewDiePie. But that's not how it happens. As Janšovek mentioned, there are so many games being released these days. You are no longer that small fish or that big fish in a small pond. Everybody is trying to be the next PewDiePie or the next Five Nights at Freddy's. And when everybody is trying to do the same thing as you, it becomes that much harder to stand out. And you have to do more work about it. I've said this before, but any independent developer who views PR as a dirty word or as something evil, they are not going to do well in this industry. Because you have to do it. You have to wear your business hat as much as your designer hat. And if you're somebody who doesn't want to talk to people or don't want anyone to look at your game, it is not going to do well. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have the greatest video game ever made if nobody knows who you are. I talked about this story before. Yep, and that's a good point as well, Blue. I'll get to that one in a second. But I talked about this story before, that I visited I kind of stalked around a Facebook indie dev group, and this woman posted a piece about, I don't know why my game is not selling. I spent the last year and a half, 2 years on this. Nobody's buying it. I'm pulling my hair out. Why isn't anybody buying my game? And she wanted people to know why. So I thought, let me do a quick look and see what's going on. So she posted the YouTube channel for, I think she had maybe 20 subscribers. Each one of her videos was just simply gameplay footage with no voice whatsoever. They may have gotten in 100 views if they were lucky, and these are videos that were up for 6 months to a year. When she posted about her game, there was no mention about it on social media. The store page is very bare bones. And it's one of those issues where it's like, how could this game not fail when you're not doing anything about it? And I sent her like a good 3-paragraph essay about all the things about what she could have done better, and she never responded. I'm pretty sure she probably blocked me for trying to make all those harsh criticisms. But the point stands is that so many people will assume that a good game is enough, and it's not that way anymore. As another case in point, we're already seeing word of mouth being spread about Spelunky 2. And Spelunky 1 was a huge success, a influential game that really defined procedural generation for a lot of people. But even he knows that he needs to get the word out now about his game, and there may even be months or years. Now, some developers do things differently. Firaxis, for instance, when it came to XCOM 2, when they announced that XCOM 2 was being released, they, I think, already had like a 6-month release date from that announcement. So the game was already pretty much along. But you have to remember that it wasn't just XCOM being announced. It was Firaxis announcing the trailer to their next big game that was already a sequel to a successful game to begin with. And that's what I think Tanya and what a lot of independent developers talk about. That for these independent studios that succeed, success breeds more success. And like I said, it becomes about chasing that dream. Another studio that has certainly earned that accolade would be Clay Entertainment, who at this point, I almost equate them to like the independent version of Blizzard. Each one of their games is a brand unto themselves, and I don't think they've had an outright failure as an independent company in these last few years. We could maybe argue some of their older games like Eats and the Shank series, but since they went full on indie, I think they've had a pretty successful track record. Now, getting back to Blue's comment earlier about, I think the platform you're targeting matters too, that's another big point. We saw this before with the mobile rush of this past decade, with so many developers, again, trying to be the next Zynga or the next King. And it just doesn't work that way. And this goes back to our previous topic with the lifestyle games. The reason why lifestyle games are so popular is that they become, at their highest level, essentially a license to print money. Like we've said with Fortnite and Overwatch and I guess even something like Clash of Clans and so on. These games don't just become about you playing the game. You are following everything and anything that has to do with it. I am sure there are Blizzard fans who bought all the apparel and merch that I mentioned in the last section because they not only want to support this brand, but they love the brand as well. I mean, again, you guys can't see behind me, but I got several dozen amiibo staring at me right now from Nintendo. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who bought the NES and SNES minis or classics, just as they are going to buy the PlayStation classics that are probably going to be released. Let me see. Again, the beauty part, this is why it's great to have Rob on, is that I can do research while he can comment on what we're talking about. But the PlayStation Classic it's already sold out, and it's got a December 3rd release date. Let's see. And I guess here's a question I just slammed my drink down for dramatic effect. Who here wants to take bets that we're going to see an XCOM, oh, I'm sorry, not XCOM, an XCOM Classic would be nice, but an Xbox Classic announced at some point, with how the system developers follow each other. Although, I wonder how heavy an Xbox Classic would be. Maybe for added effect, they'll make it like 20 pounds heavier to simulate how heavy that system was back in the day. But, again, getting back to the point, that when it comes to success like this, it all takes a lot of work. And it's one of those things that, again, I think independent developers tend to struggle with. That you release your game, it's not just it will no longer just be a guaranteed success. I've spoken with Cliff Harris and Jake Brigette about this very point, that even though they are established in this industry and they have their name behind their brand, they still can sometimes struggle to get people to notice their games. Something like Shadowhand, despite how great it was that I enjoyed it, it was still very much a hard sell for a lot of people. The same goes for Cliff's game Production Line, which I want to say, no, actually no, he hasn't announced a release date for it yet. But I'm curious how well Shadowhand did. And I know why Draken mentioned that. And that is true as well. I know. Draken is talking about twin stick shooters because he has a project. If I give you any tips, I expect a credit mention in your game inspired by Josh Bycer. I'm just kidding there. But for a lot of these developers, and this may kind of be a segue, or this may kind of be discussed next week when Rob is back on, that a lot of people believe that you need to make a, there you go, exactly, that it's all about making a unique game. I guess here is a sneak peek for next week's topic, but from the post on Polygon, let me pull this up here. I kind of did like a quick double take when I read this. Come on, Polygon, load up. Let's see. Here's the quote from a game developer, what's his name? DePaco from Studio Deconstruct team, who apparently they're the developers behind Gods Will Be Watching, yep, and the Red Strings Club. But here's his quote: "Everyone can make games, but be realistic. It used to be that you could do something that nobody had ever seen before, or you could do something familiar really well. Now it has to be innovative and have incredible quality." And I don't agree with that. While that stuff certainly helps, it has to be more than just, again, a lot of people think that the quality of the game is just it, and a good game will sell itself. But that's not the case. You have to do PR work. And for something like the Red Strings Club, like, I don't see that, I did not see any real information about it. Oh, he also said, "I think that if we released Gods Will Be Watching today, it would have failed." But again, it raises this question: what did they do to make that game succeed? This is why a lot of people, or I think this is why a lot of Kickstarter-based games who did their job right tend to keep succeeding. Same thing goes for Cultist Simulator. I'm sure it will go for Boyfriend Simulator, and it went for Darkest Dungeon as well. That, like I said, when people look at Darkest Dungeon, they may only see a Lovecraftian roguelike that was released on Steam. But as we're aware, it wasn't just that. Darkest Dungeon is a game that had a year, and probably more so, of pre-release hype and news built around it. It had a very successful Kickstarter campaign that led to a very successful early access. The developers knew the development cycle, and they knew how to work on the game and keep it budgeted and get the game out. So it succeeded on Steam. It was one of the best sellers, which spread more word of mouth, which led to the game being ported right now onto every, I believe it's on every console now, including, I think the PSP had a version for it, which led to more success. So now when people talk about Darkest Dungeon, they talk about a game that was an unmitigated success, which also led to them having several GDC talks, which I've watched as well. But again, so many people will just see Darkest Dungeon as a listing on a Steam page or PSN or Switch, and that's it. And I'm sure there are independent developers who thought to themselves, well, I can make a Lovecraftian game, I'll make the next Darkest Dungeon, and I'll have all this untold success. But again, they don't see the work that goes into it. Same thing goes for Shovel Knight and Yacht Club Games. Even though the game is certainly, I think, over their original budget and intention, they have put so much goodwill and marketing into Shovel Knight that he's now an amiibo, which, again, I have his amiibo staring at me back there. He's now a guest character in other independent games. He's an assist trophy that's going to be in Smash Bros. Ultimate. And again, whatever Yacht Club Games announces next, it will get a lot of press coverage simply for free by virtue of their name. And you have to leverage your name like that. My eyes starting to twitch for some reason there. I don't know why. Yep. And that's a good point as well. I'll get to that one in a second. But for a lot of these studios, and again, going back to Tanya's point, once you become big enough that your name brings clout and success, that does a lot to help you. I'm sorry I'm rubbing my eyes so much. All of a sudden, my allergies started to work on me and my eyes twitching uncontrollably. But this is why, for Axis, for instance, brands their game Sid Meier's Civilization. Because Sid Meier's name carries weight. I'm sure if Nintendo could do it, they could say Shigeru Miyamoto's Mario. Although now, of course, Mario is being run by different studios. They have different teams making the various Mario games, as with Zelda. So it gets to that point again that once you are able to get that success, it does a lot. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go off camera for a second while I rub my eye and hope it will stop bothering me there. But again, I think I'll get to Blue's question now, but before I do that, marketing is such an influential, my mouth is starting to die on me, it's such a critical point about being successful in the industry. But with that said, though, I'm sure somebody will comment either live or recorded say that, what about the games that fail? Or what about the amount of money that goes into marketing? And that's the dark side of marketing, and why a lot of people, despite what I said, still fight tooth and nail against marketing. Because it's viewed as being manipulative, or it's viewed as being a way of you throwing your money away. If I spend $100,000 on a marketing campaign and nobody buys my game, that $100,000 could have gone towards making my game better. It could have gone towards paying more people or paying my employees. And it's why a lot of people view marketing as this evil thing. When we talk about on the high-end scale, when you see AAA studios like Activision, Nintendo, Sony, and so on have these massive campaigns, when we see like a Call of Duty game appear as a Super Bowl commercial, or No Man's Sky, when Sean Murray, there you go, I almost forgot his name there, when Sean Murray did a late night TV or talk show circuit, when he was on, I think, either Colbert or what was it? I can't even remember which show he was on. But that kind of stuff costs a lot of money. And again, marketing does not guarantee. Thank you, he was on Colbert. Marketing does not guarantee success like that. But it raises that question. Could this game have done as well without its marketing budget? Another big point is Cuphead. We've talked about Cuphead many times before. I would like to get them on if they ever answer my emails. But Studio MDHR talked about how they took a second mortgage out on their house and went all in on Cuphead, even before they decided to expand the scope of the game to include the run and gun segments. But as we all know, Cuphead, when they originally did the marketing campaign, put teaser footage out, that was enough to attract Microsoft, who became the publisher for the game. And then when Microsoft got involved, suddenly Studio MDHR had Microsoft's marketing budget to go with. We saw more campaigns for it. We saw them get mentioned at E3. And all that stuff led to a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise know about the game knowing what Cuphead was. And again, it raises that question. It's a question that we will never have an answer to. If Cuphead stuck with their original version, kept as being fully an independent developer without any outside support, would have been the same breakout hit as it was with Microsoft's backing. Again, we don't know. And like we've said before, the flip side of the coin was that Cuphead would have been released and been a dismal failure that would have bankrupted Studio MDHR. Was there a Kickstarter for Cuphead? Oh, for the game similar to Cuphead. No, I do not remember that at all. And I'm sure just typing Cuphead into Kickstarter doesn't do a Steamboat. Let's see. No, that is not bringing it up as well. But there's another good point. Again, the other big problem is when people try to copy, and this is a good segue into Blue's question earlier, that once a big name game does become successful and other studios try to emulate it or copy it, they are trying to kind of siphon off the marketing from that game. Yeah, I don't even remember that one as well. But this is why we see, the next Battle Royale game, the next Call of Duty, the next Battlefield, and so on, that you're trying to basically leverage another game's success in their marketing to get people to play your game. Because if they like PUBG, I'm sure they'll like Fortnite. And I'm sure if they like Fortnite, they're going to like my take on it. But the problem, and again, going back to lifestyle games in general, is that these games become their own marketing campaign, their own brand, and their own unique segment in the game industry. And let me see here. I want to check something out really fast. Pretend Rob is talking right now. Lawbreakers came out August 8th, 2017. Overwatch was released May 24th, 2016. So that is a... there you go. That could be your game track, and make that your next twin-stick shooter, and maybe... and who knows, maybe that will become a massive success there. But Overwatch was released almost a full year behind or in front of Lawbreakers. And again, even if it was intentional or not, once a game, becomes that big name success, any other game that's similar, will become contenders for the throne or copycats in that regard. And another big point, again, is that so much of the marketing, I think, behind Lawbreakers also kind of failed in that front. Here's the thing. If I pull up screenshots of Lawbreakers right now, it looks kind of like, again, every other first-person team-based shooter that you see. Now, when I pull up images of Overwatch, we have, these very distinct and original characters standing there. Someone like... I don't even play Overwatch. I don't remember any of their names there. But you can tell just by looking at these characters that there's something different here. The same thing, it's that same little secret sauce that went to Team Fortress 2. You look at Team Fortress 2 and you compare it to a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty, and they're almost night and day. You put the Heavy in an image or the Spy, and it is entirely and immediately recognizable. And again, these characters become their own brand. Valve's Meet the Team videos was a marketing genius strategy for them. Yeah, and that's the thing. What does Lawbreakers even mean? Although, to be fair, what does Overwatch mean if you don't know what that lore is? But, again, so much about these games, and here's another big point. As we know about Overwatch, Overwatch originally began as Blizzard's MMO replacement to World of Warcraft. It was supposed to be a sci-fi take that they eventually decided to say, you know what, screw it, it's not working out. But they took all these characters and they made a brand new game out of it. And that kind of worked for them. But again, that's essentially almost 2 games worth of development that went into Overwatch. Now, with Lawbreakers, it just got really dark there. That's weird. I don't know why it got so dark all of a sudden in here. Let me see if I can raise my... 1 second. I'm going to try and adjust my shade. Whoop. Well, that just went up, but that should bring in some more light so people can hopefully see me. Which I think probably made it worse, but who cares at this point. But the point being that when it comes to the amount of work that goes into these kind of games, marketing, the PR, and even just having as little as your own website for people to find goes a long way. You want to have that footprint. And then as your game hopefully succeeds, it grows. Now, even with that said, though, that kind of success, as we've said, doesn't guarantee future game releases. There's a piece by Greg, I always forget his last name, the developer from Supergiant Games, who talked about how Pyre, their last game, was a failure compared to Transistor and Bastion. So even your name may not be big enough in some cases, or enough, but it certainly does go a long way to help in terms of getting your game or getting things going. But we're